Welcome to another episode of the Trusted Advisor podcast and video series powered by the Retail Solutions Providers Association. Our goal on the pod is to accelerate the success of today's and tomorrow's leaders in the retail IT industry. I'm Jim Roddy, back with you again. Thank you so much for joining us. Now, throughout this year, we've been talking with leaders about their leadership journeys and what they've learned along the way. And we have two special guests today who are going to talk about handing off leadership responsibilities to each other. Our first guest is Brett Bennett, the co-founder and president of Retail VAR Positive Technology and retail software provider OpSuite, with offices in Maryland, New York, and where he's based in Scottsdale, Arizona. Brett's a member of the RSPA Board of Directors, just completing his one-year term as board chair. Now, Brett was a guest here on the Trusted Advisor way back in episode number 8, talking about his company's VAR to ISV transition. Brett, welcome back to the Trusted Advisor.
Thank you, Jim. Happy to be here.
Glad to have you here. And our second guest is Jeff Riley, the CEO of Retail Management Hero, a retail-focused software provider. Jeff was general manager of Microsoft Retail Solutions in the early 2000s before leaving in 2004 to become CEO of restaurant software startup Dinerware, which was sold to Heartland in 2015. Jeff joined RMH 3 years later in 2018. And like Brett, Jeff is a past Trusted Advisor guest. Go back to episode 18, The Future of ISVs, and he is an RSPA board member as well, just beginning his one-year term as board chair, taking the gavel from Brett. Jeff, great to talk with you again.
Thank you, Jim. Appreciate it.
Great. And so our conversation today is going to focus on that handoff from one board chair to another to serve as an example of best practices for leaders who are handing off responsibilities, and to kind of spoil, what do they say, spoiler alert here. It's not that you just dump it on somebody, right? It's not just an abdication. It's very much a long handoff is what it is. And it's kind of interesting because the three of us talk like every week and have been talking almost every week for the past year or so. So it's nice to be recording one of these conversations. So I guess, Brett, and if you can start off first and share with our listeners and viewers a little bit more behind the scenes and talk about how you helped onboard Jeff to be part of the RSPA Executive Committee. And can you also talk about, while you're spelling out that specific example, the importance of that kind of activity before you're delegating key responsibilities?
Sure. Thank you, Jim. Love this. Love being here. Love serving in the RSPA board. It's awesome. So to start out, I've known Jeff for the better part of 25 years. And honestly, I've always been impressed by his leadership qualities. He's got a really great way of thinking deeply, and he's very skilled at communication. So because of that long experience that I have with Jeff and the knowledge of how he leads and how he manages everything that he does, I think the onboarding process was a little different than maybe the onboarding process would be with someone else. So that said, the fact that we have that strong, mutually respectful relationship, we were able to have open communication throughout this entire process, which, as you said, is a long process. It's essentially a full year plus, really, because we actually had the opportunity to include Jeff on a few board meetings prior to him joining as the incoming chair. He was a guest, and that gave him an opportunity to meet all of the board, as well as those that are advisors on the board. And that kind of gave him a leg up in what was going on the board before he actually joined the committee. So then once on the executive committee, he was able to play a very important part in each of our weekly meetings, in the board meetings that we had. And though he maybe wasn't up to speed on every single topic, he had enough knowledge to be comfortable in digging in deeper when needed. And of course, Michelle Sirois, and I were happy to dig in, and you included, Jim, we're happy to dig in on any of those topics as we went. And just going on the responsibility, I think that we all feel the responsibility of being trusted to being part of this committee, the executive committee and the board. and we take it very seriously. And so the time and effort that we put into preparing and delegating and doing those things that are needed to try to make the best decisions for the board and for the association, we take them very, very seriously, and they're paramount.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I guess if I can drill down on one aspect of it, because I'm thinking about this, if I'm listening to this, I'm going to try to pull out as many nuggets as I can in terms of, a best practice. Is a best practice like part of the reason why this process went well from your perspective is you knew Jeff and you got to really know him more as a person than just what was on his resume. And that sounds like that's an important step in terms of if you're going to delegate leadership responsibilities to somebody, just don't know their skills, but know them as a person, right? That is vitally important. That gave you more confidence that Jeff was the right person and could make this process be a strong one, as opposed to learning something along the way, like, oh, I didn't know about this, and this personality quirk or things of that nature.
Well, in my book, from a leadership standpoint, the most important principle is trust and mutual respect for those whom you're working with, and certainly those whom you're grooming or bringing up as leaders. And I can say without a doubt that, Jeff and I have a very strong mutual respect and trust one another. So that played a huge role in it. So we didn't have to overcome anything, right? We didn't have to overcome, who are you? Are you going to be trustworthy in this? No. We were already there.
Great, thank you for that. Jeff, how about your perspective? How did the onboarding process work for you? Can you talk about in terms of helping it get you acclimated, but then also the challenge of you're a longtime action-oriented, accomplished leader, but then having to hold off before you are the leader. And, we kind of talked off camera, like this was among the longest, if not the longest, onboarding process that you've ever had. Can you talk about how it helped, but then also the challenge as well?
Yeah, sure. I think in any organization or any group or team which is governed by a leadership process, there are different chemistry aspects involved. There are different people involved, different personalities. And I think that because the RSPA organization is a very mature organization with a sizable board, it's pretty easy to be a part of that group and not necessarily feel the need to exert strong leadership. I think there are a lot of good leaders in that forum, and the opportunity to sit as a quiet leader, not a de facto in charge leader, for a full year as incoming chair, and even for a couple of meetings ahead of time, as Brett mentioned, was a real luxury. I mean, it was you don't often get the opportunity to observe a group before you're responsible for some part of it. So I thought that was a luxury, that was a benefit, that made it easier. And I think also watching Brett and watching Michelle Serrois before Brett be past chair while Brett was active chair, both of those opportunities were a real benefit for me as coming in to observe the different leadership styles that each of them exhibited and how they differed, how they were similar. So it was a luxury I'm not used to. Let's put it that way.
Thank you for that. And I have one follow-up question, but first a few points for folks who might not be familiar with the RSPA. As Jeff said, mature organizations celebrating 76 years in existence. From a board member standpoint, we do have a large board. In fact, I couldn't tell you off the top of my head, it's exactly this number. It's like around a dozen or something like that. But we have so many people, I don't know off the top of my head. It's not like 4 or something like that. And then Michelle Serrois, who's been referenced a couple times, he was the chair before Brett. He's the president of Blue Star Canada. So then he selected Brett to succeed him. And that's how the process goes. And so I guess, Jeff, I'm glad you brought up the point of leadership sometimes is listening. It's following, it's helping out. I work with a gentleman, John Dudenhofer, who was in the Air Force for 20 years. His final job there before he retired was leading the Air Force's Leadership Academy. And he would preach all the time the importance of followership, right? Where if people see you being a very strong and dedicated follower, that is actually a form of leadership as well, right? People see that you don't have to be out in front or the one talking all the time. I guess, can you touch on that a little bit and tying in with that? Like, followership is leadership in many ways. There are times where we have to play different roles, and you had to start off playing a different role.
Absolutely. In fact, before we got on the podcast today, I thought about being a good follower. Is often a good attribute of a leader. And I think that part of that goes with the humble servant mentality, which is if you're a very effective leader, you're going to lead by example. You're going to lead by modeling the behavior that you want to see the group demonstrate as individuals. And so a lot of that is having two ears and one mouth.
Exactly. Well, I can say I know that's a struggle. Like, as you're talking about it right now, I can think of many times where I'm thinking in between my ears, that is not exactly how I would do it. And then you say, you know what, let's give it a try. Like, I'll help you out. And what do you need from me? But you're like, oh, and it's out of your comfort zone. But then at the end, you realize oftentimes it turns out better than you would have done on your own. And then the person actually has a real learning experience as opposed to just do exactly what I do. So, and Brett, that leads me into my next question. So, again, we talked about, so Jeff, right from the get-go gets on board. It takes a few meetings, a few cycles to understand, exactly the situation and how it works. And so he doesn't have the same experiences as you, but he's ready to contribute as part of the leadership team. So let's talk about, in that context, collaborative leadership. So what do you see as some important principles to follow to be part of a successful leadership team, not just that one person, right? So what are the principles, and then what are some of the challenges that you see in terms of collaborative leadership?
Sure. So I think I'll go back to what I just mentioned a bit ago, and that is the principle of trust and mutual respect, which I feel that our executive committee, both previous to now, with Michelle and Jeff and myself and you, Jim, as well as currently adding in Brianna, we have that in spades. We have a lot of mutual trust, a lot of mutual respect. And I think that is absolutely key to what we do. So just defining that a little bit, I feel that is the ability and willingness to openly discuss the decisions that we have to make. That we can disagree respectfully, that we can offer opinions with an open mind, and that we're willing to spend the time to hear each other's thoughts, and then be strong, and as Jeff just mentioned a bit ago, be humble enough to come to the right or maybe the best decision. Sometimes we don't make the right decision, but we make the best decision we can with the data that we have. And I love C.S. Lewis. And I was thinking about a quote. He said, two heads are better than one, not because either is infallible, but because they are unlikely to go wrong in the same direction. And just with that in mind, thinking back over the last few years, I can't think of any situation where, in serving together on the executive committee, where we've come out of with a decision where we weren't going the same direction. We've always been headed in the same direction. Nobody was like, all right, go ahead. I don't agree, but I'll go ahead. It was always, mutual agreement. And I think that requires all of those important leadership traits that we've been talking about.
Great, thank you for that. And a point of clarification, the Brianna that Brett mentioned is Brianna Buccellato, the former Brianna Moriarty. She's with Epson America. She is now the incoming chair. So maybe a year from now, Jeff will have you and Brianna on and talk about this whole process again and how that's working for her. So Jeff, give me your take on collaborative leadership. Can you build on what Brett said? It'd be interesting if you're like, I totally disagree, like totally the opposite way. Describe
how opportune that would be. I can't honestly say that's what's going on in my heart right now, but I do think that there are topics that come up that are controversial and not uniformly agreed upon. One of which happened just in our last board meeting, where Jim, you and I were tag teaming the presentation of a new idea that didn't meet with uniform acceptance and excitement. And, I think it's a real example of a case in point for collaborative leadership. While you and or we would have loved to see that initiative take the next step, but the feedback we got from the leadership in the room was not consensual. It was not everyone was on the same page. And we took that feedback, and I think that part of collaborative leadership is understanding our role. And if the role of the chair or the role of the leader in any given organization or group is to represent the group as a whole, and I'm not saying that's always the case for that leader's role, but I think for the chair in RSPA, as an example, it really is. It's really to represent the membership as a whole. Then really that listening part of collaborative leadership is extra important to really reflect and internalize and interpret what the group think is, what the group consensus is. And we did that. And so while I think that individually we would have liked to see that discussion go a slightly different direction, the reality is the outcome was representative of the group's interest as a whole.
Got it. Thank you for sharing that. And I'll share two things. One is, before I joined it, I was from age 23 to 28. I had my own business, and it was a sports magazine, and did my own writing. And then when I joined an organization, I remember somebody talked to me about team writing. And I was thinking like, well, this sounds like the worst thing in the world, right? It's going to slow me down because I'm just ready to move forward. But then you learn the value of, wow, other people can actually make it better. And it kind of, you knock yourself off your pedestal in that way as well. I could have had more of a humble, help me attitude with that. And then I'll let either one of you follow up on this. And so building on what you said and what we talk about to all our board members, the thing that you can do in collaborative leadership is, number one, listen. Number two, ask good, deep, hard questions, right? You said, Brett, earlier, like, people aren't afraid to pull punches. Like, ask the difficult question. And then the third one is share your perspective, because even though you guys knew each other, you both have different perspectives. Michelle Sirois, a distributor in Canada, has a different perspective. Brianna, right, working for a hardware manufacturer, has a different perspective. I guess, can either one of you, who wants to pick up on that? Listen, ask good questions, and share your perspective. That's collaborative leadership. It doesn't always have to be dictating, here's what we're going to do next.
I can respond to that initially. I just think that, I think part of being an effective leader is reading the room and understanding where energy is coming from that isn't always spoken. And there are always the personalities in the room that are very comfortable to speak. And there are also the more quiet, thoughtful, not always thoughtful, more thoughtful, but in many cases more thoughtful, quieter people that have a lot to say but are more reserved about when they talk. An effective leader will observe that and see that happening and elicit that response and that participation, so that there is more collaboration going on instead of just the domination of a few personalities.
I agree. And
yeah, go ahead, Brett.
Yeah, just one of the things I think about, and this goes back to many of the kind of leadership meetings that I've been involved in for many years. I feel like if I come out of a meeting where we're making big decisions, if we haven't had at least a little bit of a heated discussion, if we haven't had at least somebody kind of say, well, what if, or what about, or, I'm worried about, then I'm concerned, right? I'm unsettled because I don't think we've vetted everything. I feel like it's super, super important to be able to be comfortable in those meetings, in voicing that opinion, whatever it is. But on the other hand, being strong enough and humble enough to listen, and listen to what, maybe I'm the one that was opposing. I need to be able then to listen to everyone else, understand, come to a bottom line, and then hopefully everybody come out, whatever it takes, the other side together, heading in the same direction. So I think that there's a lot of value in that kind of coming together with a little bit of punches to then end when, all right, we all agree, and yeah, it maybe wasn't the easiest thing, just like our last that Jeff mentioned, our last board meeting. It wasn't necessarily comfortable to hear, some of it, but in the end, that's the right decision. It's the best decision that we could make. And wow, how important is that? And how great is that we can do that and come out on the other side to be stronger?
Yeah, frictionless is a good thing for the IT solutions that folks design and sell in our community, but it should not be made with frictionless decision-making process, right? There is something that having a healthy rub. We talk about that internally at the RSPA, and I've learned this throughout my years. There should be a healthy rub between sales and operations. There shouldn't be one side, dominating the other. One's always correct. And just like among individuals, there should always be some friction no matter what the titles are. So, well, gentlemen, thank you for that. I wanted to dive into collaborative leadership a little bit. So, okay, so let's talk next about the challenge of delegating knowledge and delegating best practices, right? We all agreed you need to ask hard questions, you need to listen, but we don't all have the same leadership style. So I guess, can you guys both help set the scene for our audience who maybe doesn't know you as well as I do? So Brett, if you want to go first, can you describe your individual leadership style, and then Jeff, share yours? And I'm guessing you guys will not use the exact same identical words.
I'm guessing not. And looking at myself, I may say my leadership style is X. Jim, you may tell me, I don't think so, but I'll go for it. And you can tell me in the end if I'm way off base. So I see myself from a leadership standpoint of kind of, a mix between delegative and servant. So the very first priority for me is to surround myself with people who I feel are smarter than me, who can fill the gaps where I lack, who can, over time, I feel, step into my shoes when and if necessary. Then I step back and make it my focus to provide them with the tools, any knowledge that I can give, and then autonomy. The autonomy to make those decisions that that I've given them, and allow them to succeed. I tend to try to give a kind of the big picture, and then step back as much as I feel comfortable and let them put in their ingredients to hopefully make that a success. Of course, I'm there to give guidance and so forth along the way, but I try not to throw any wrenches in their cogs, because I think over time, even little successes provide a lot of strength in their future leadership skill. So then, with regard to delegating knowledge and history related to the RSPA, the structure that we've mentioned is brilliant, right? We have an opportunity to be the incoming chair for a full year, to experience, to understand, to learn, to know. And then we serve as a chair for a full year. Hopefully we have the knowledge that we need. But even if we don't, there is an outgoing chair or a past chair that sits for that next year who can jump in and say, oh, by the way, we didn't talk about this last year, but this came up, and here is some history, here is some information. So it's such a great structure to provide strong leadership year over year over year, because it's not just drop you into place, good luck. It's a 3-year process. I love it.
Yeah, not good luck, go get them, Tiger. Figure it out on your own. Jeff, talk about your leadership style. And I was thinking there might even be a thing where it's situational, because like as Brett was talking about for his organization, that, Brett, I'd say you've had a stable organization, about the same size, growing, steadily. Jeff, you had a big challenge 6 years ago, right, where you really had to build up RMH. Like Brett was talking about delegating and stepping back, and you're like, well, who would I delegate to, right? Because you had to do so much team building along the way. I guess talk about your individual leadership style and maybe tying in with your leadership situation that you had at RMH.
I appreciate it. That's a good observation on your part. I think that one of the things that I bring to the role of leadership is situational awareness. And I think that's really important. If you're a leader of a 6-person team versus a leader of a 500-person team, the needs for leadership are very different. And when I joined RMH, I believe there were about 9 or 10 team members in total, and now we're up to 27. So the need for my leadership changes over time based in part on what the objectives of the organization are and the resources we have to fulfill those needs. So oftentimes I'll be player coach, and other times I'll just be coach, and sometimes I don't even get invited to be coach. So we'll and that's all about being humble and being a servant to allow people the autonomy to pursue the objectives they have with the right level of oversight, which in some cases is not very much at all, as Brett was alluding to earlier. I like to be open-minded. I like to understand that people are different and have different needs. And I like to try to walk into a situation where I'm coaching or managing somebody and assess what the need is for that person of me and what I can add to the value in the equation of my relationship with them. So I do think it makes me more of a chameleon. It makes me more have to be more adaptable. But I do have a general approach that is a leadership style, which is very big on open and transparent communication. It's very big on critical thinking and precision questioning. So I'm not, while I'm the leader of a software development organization, I am not myself a software developer. So I have to utilize that lack of expertise appropriately so that I'm not trying to overstep my bounds and guide technical resources with a non-technical skill set and experience base. But use logic and precision questioning to understand how to get the information I need to help make the right decisions. Versus, smaller initiatives going on within our company, we have individuals who have a broad set of responsibilities for a small area, and they have to be pretty adept and adaptable to different types of responsibilities that they have within their job responsibilities that call on things that they aren't naturally good at. And so I hope to see those areas of exposure and try to fill those in with either my own contributions or other team members. So I do think that a big part of effective leadership is assessing situations and adapting to them.
Yes, and it can be difficult where the other person is really committed to what they want to do and to try to get all the tough questions out. And like you said, follow through the critical thinking. And sometimes people still convince themselves, right? No, this is the right thing to do. As you guys were both talking about situational, there was a time, so I was president of Jameson Publishing. We had a sister company that was a web company we had recently acquired. I got to sit in that steering committee. Also on the steering committee was the president. He had way more experience than me of one of the sister companies that the owners had bought, and a topic came up. The web company wanted to hire a 19-year-old salesperson, and I don't know how you guys feel about that, but I'm thinking like, there's no way you're going to be able to sell, $50,000, $80,000, $90,000 contracts if you're 19 years old, and you really can't bet on that kid long term. I just remember we had a long discussion on it, and they were convinced, no, we're going to go ahead and hire him. And everybody leaves the room, and I turned to the guy, his name was Don. I'm like, Don, would you hire a 19-year-old? Nope. Like right away. And so you walked out of the room going like, man, they're doing the wrong thing. But then you come through, okay, how can they learn from it? And eventually it did not work out. The kid, believe it or not, decided to backpack through Europe, right? Because that's what all his friends are doing. We're like, we could have seen this coming. But that's a tough thing, is you get in that situation where you're trying to guide and give counsel, but you can't dictate, because then people be like, well, then you're going to make all the decisions here, is what you do. So all right, next question I have for you guys. We're talking about leadership styles. You both have different personalities and communication styles. Can you talk about how you hand off what's necessary, right? Explaining the why without dictating exactly how to do it. Brett, if you want to take that one first.
Yeah, absolutely. I think about, I think from my personality standpoint, I'm a fairly quiet personality. I am one of those that will definitely sit back and listen, and then, make a decision of my own and then share what I have to say. I'm not usually the first one to jump in and hey, here's what you've got to do, and here's how you've got to do it. So that's kind of this process that we've been through in handoff has been tremendous for that, right? Because as I mentioned earlier, I think a good leader surrounds themselves with good people. I am surrounded by great people, both on the board and certainly on the executive committee. Lead by example. I try to do that the best that I can. I've tried to do everything that I can within my knowledge of the RSPA, of the association, of the board, to lead by example, share responsibility as possible, and it's I don't think sharing responsibility started back in August when we transitioned, when I handed the gavel over to Jeff. It happened way before that, right? We shared responsibilities along the way, and then spend whatever time is necessary to build and train Jeff, and I think both Michelle, myself, and you as well, Jim, have done that over the last year. And not that Jeff needed a whole lot of molding and training. He obviously has all the skills, so that's great. So really, that handoff that we're talking about has been happening over the past year plus. And though I'm maybe a subtle leader, I like it that way, and I think it's good in this situation. So so I think it's benefited us to have that opportunity, and I don't think we've had to get to the why necessarily on everything, because that has been natural. We've had a great year of learning and growing together, and so in a nutshell, I think that handoff has been exceptional. I hope Jeff, you feel the same way.
Yeah, definitely. It's been a very smooth process. I think what you said, Brett, also about our relationship being a long-term relationship based upon mutual respect is just made for the entire context of the situation to be easy, and I think the other luxury that we have as leaders transitioning responsibility is that this transition is by design. This is an annual thing. So there is a rhythm to it. There is a set of best practices that have evolved around it. And the other thing that we have going for this leadership transition of responsibilities is that we have the continuity of Jim and the RSPA staff to draw upon as the foundation for this change to take place. And that's not often the case with leadership responsibility transfer. So there's by far and away, there are many other examples of responsibilities transitioning and leadership roles transitioning, which do not have this garden path to walk down.
Right. A lot of times it happens in an emergency, right? But this maybe a backdrop to this whole thing. What we're talking about is, if it's like, start delegating now. Don't wait until it's a crisis situation. Start handing off smaller jobs and taking the baby steps now. So when it is time, it isn't you're starting at square one and going from there. So, well, we got to get a commercial break in. So we're going to pause to let our listeners and viewers know about the Retail Solution Providers Association. Obviously, this is for our audience, not for Brett and Jeff. They know all this stuff already. The RSPA, we didn't have to start. This wasn't part of the delegation process with Jeff. Jeff, let me tell you what RSPA stands for. But RSPA is North America's largest community of retail technology VARs, software providers, vendors, and distributors. Members benefit from RSPA white glove service, which is provided by the member services team of Peggy Fry, Nicole Green, and Ashley Nagy. Instead of leaving you on your own to navigate our growing list of member companies, Peggy, Nicole, and Ashley will make warm one-on-one introductions on your behalf to fellow members who can accelerate your success. To learn more, email membership@gorspa.org. Also, thanks to our sponsors who support the RSPA community and make this podcast and video series possible. Our platinum sponsor is Blue Star. Our gold sponsors are CoCard, Epson, Heartland, and ScanSource. And then finally, save the date for Inspire 2025, the Retail IT Channel's premier leadership conference. RSPA Inspire is set for January 26th through 29th in Curacao. For more information, visit gorspa.org/inspire so you too can experience networking nirvana. All right, so that was a perfect time for a break because now, as folks know, have caught on. So Jeff is officially the chair, right? He has the gavel. And Brett, can you talk about first the challenge of stepping back, but still being part of the leadership team, right? Giving Jeff the space to lead, but not like abandoning him or stepping too far back.
Absolutely. I think back many years ago when I first had the opportunity to take some leadership positions, and I'm passionate. I am passionate in everything that I do, and I take things very personally, right? And I learned pretty early on in that process that I'm not a very good follower. I prefer to be in that leadership position. I want to drive. I want to grow. I want to go. However, I've learned over the years that those are not traits of a good leader. A good leader is not one who is like, get out of my way. I'm doing it. I don't need anybody else. I found that I do need others. I absolutely need everyone around me. In fact, I cannot lead without those around me. And, I absolutely respect Jeff as a leader. I fully recognize him as the board chair. And I am, I've learned this over the years. Again, I am absolutely willing to respectfully share my opinions, but to humbly take orders or assignments or whatever is needed and execute them. When it comes down to it, I love the RSPA. I love the association. I love serving on the board, and I'm going to do whatever I can while I'm still on the committee for this next year to support Jeff and to support the executive committee and the board and the association as best as I can. So I'm happy to step aside and allow Jeff to lead and be my leader.
Yeah, my former boss, he was delegating for me to be the lead of the organization. I mean, he was the owner still. He was in the steering committee meetings. He could have jumped in and answered every question, but he would write down every time to start the meeting, he would write on his agenda, smart silence in all caps. And then when he felt like speaking, he would just retrace it and keep retracing it. And that was his device to make sure that he didn't, when he felt the need to speak, he'd get to the end of the meeting and you would see like he would be through the paper, onto the table. Sometimes, but it helped that he only jumped in when he absolutely needed to, not when his nervous system told him, because for 20 years, 30 years, he spoke at those times, but he needed to hand it off. So Jeff, share your perspective, right? You're the leader. Like we said, you have the gavel, but talk about continuing to engage Brett as past chair and tapping into his knowledge.
I think that it's just wise for current leaders to look at their predecessors for experience, for lessons learned, for the wisdom that's needed to complement their responsibility as leader. So, Brett is one of those figures in the room that does have kind of unilateral respect. Brett's business name is Positive Technology, and it kind of personifies his attitude and demeanor professionally. And so that positivity translates not only in terms of how he conducts business and how he portrays himself, how he carries himself, but also as the type of person that people want to hear from. Because it's just, it's that everyone craves that positivity. Everyone craves that mindset. So I admire that first and foremost, and Brett brings that. But I also admire the fact that for example, in our past board meeting, we had 3 past chairs in the room, and that RSPA embraces the wisdom of the town elders, so to speak, to have a voice in the community and at the board level. Past chairs are invited back to participate in board meetings. And it was that, in part, that wisdom that helped guide and create direction around some of the issues that we brought up. And so I certainly don't want to be sitting in the chair, the chair, with full responsibility for the weight of the organization and all the decisions without that wisdom, without that sage advice and that counsel. And so it makes me feel more comfortable handling the responsibilities to have that extra wisdom and those extra voices in the room.
Yeah, good point. I know we have other committees like the endowment committee, and we lean on Dave McCarthy, right, who's been doing that for a long time. He's now retired, but we're tapping him on the shoulder a lot of times to say, hey, give us the full perspective and the context of this, because boy, there's I've always joked, in school they won't let you look off somebody else's piece of paper, but in business it's like, can I see what's on your paper? Sure, here, like look, right? Like cheating is legal in business in that regard, but a lot of times people don't take advantage of that. They feel like they've got to do it all on their own. So we don't have much time left, and one of my questions is, and I give a spoiler alert right at the get-go. I'll give another one again. As we were reviewing these questions in advance, I have one that says, looking back, what would you do differently? What could have been done better? And Brett, your answer was like, I really don't think, there's anything more. Like this was a year-long process. We left no stone unturned. And then Jeff, can you talk about, you said, yeah, like maybe we were over-prepared for this. Talk about the other end of this in terms of, or your perspective, or why you would say like, man, maybe it was over preparation. Talk about that.
I think that it goes back to situational awareness, and like I know that there have been some changes in the history of the RSPA that weren't planned, that didn't go as smoothly, and I think that it's the wisdom of an organization over a number of years that puts processes in place to prevent those situations from happening, or to minimize the impact of them happening if they do happen. And so I think that what you see with the year-long transition of the incoming chair, the current chair, and the outgoing chair, or the past chair, that's that wisdom in action. And some years, probably most years, it's not completely necessary. But other years, there are unplanned changes, like the time when John Kirk left and you stepped into the role, Jim.
Yep, he retired. Yep.
There was not as much planning that was possible. There was more of this is an urgent situation. There's a lot that has to be figured out and done very quickly. So I think that you just have to read the room, so to speak, understand the situation, look where process is beneficial, look where process is in place, and draw upon that. And if it's overdone, if it's too much, if it's unnecessary, well, maybe you can streamline it. Maybe you can make the decision to change it to reduce the amount of resources that are invested in having it continue to go on. But maybe it's just one of those years that it wasn't necessary because everything went well.
Yeah, and you couldn't have known that at the beginning of the year, right? And so maybe it's better to over prepare than it is to under prepare. So. All right, so I have time for one more question. And so the one that I don't think I've ever asked you guys this, because, every time we meet, we've got an agenda and we got to dive into things about the association. I'm curious if you can share, Brett, if you want to take this first, like who are some leaders you look up to as mentors and have helped shape your leadership approach? And like, what did somebody, or, a group of people or a few individuals, what did they say or do that's had a lasting impact on you?
Oh, that's so good. So there's two mentors that I have had in my life, both of them fairly early in my life, who impacted my entire career, not even just my career, but my entire life in different ways. And if you don't mind, I'll give a story about one of them. Jerry Sargent. He was my first real kind of boss, right? I'm 21. This is so 1990. I just came back from a 2-year stint in Dominican Republic. I served a mission there, and he called me. He was my previous scoutmaster. He called me and said, "Hey, do you know computers?" I'm like, "What's a computer?" Sure, I know computers. Again, 1990, and his son worked for Apple. Anyway, he was writing a point of sale system on the Macintosh for Levi Strauss, and he wanted somebody to come in and help him in this startup. Well, kind of fast forward a little bit, I was in charge of sales and support, and he gave me the responsibility of writing user documentation for the new product that was coming out. And I would give him one kind of section at a time. And I remember this first section, it was such a learning experience, because he took the section, he would give me the red line back. I would make all of the changes. I would give it back to him. He would red line it again, give it back to me. That went on like 7 or 8 times. And I'm getting frustrated, right? Because I'm like, this is perfect. You've already gone through it. What's going on? And just before I'm ready to walk out the door, just never come back because I'm so frustrated, he sat me down and we had a discussion, not about the documentation, but about being precise, being accurate in everything that we do in business. So he sat me down and we had this long business discussion. Essentially, I found out 2 years later when I was ready to leave and start my own business, he's like, you remember that time? And I was like, yeah, it was hard. And he was like, this is what I was preparing you for. So you could go on your own. And, that changed my life in a whole lot of different ways because I had confidence then to start my own business. I had confidence to move forward in areas that I never would have done otherwise. And it was because of him.
Yes, and because he made you do the hard thing, he gave that constructive criticism that gave you the genuine skills, right? The genuine knowledge, skills, and that's why you had the confidence to go do something on your own, if I'm understanding that correctly.
That's absolutely correct. And that wasn't the only, example over and over at that time, but that was the one I remember the most because it was just took me to the edge to make a point.
Awesome. I love it. And you'll I have on my list to interview on the podcast. Her name is Ann Lantham, and she calls herself the Queen of Clarity. And so she's written a book about being precise and clear. So might have her on the podcast. So thanks for sharing that story. Jeff, who are some leaders you look up to? Who's been your mentors? What did they say or do that's had an impact on you today?
Well, flying right in the face of trying to be precise and clear.
No pressure.
My mind is swimming with my life of experiences and my formative career years, time at Microsoft, time in prior roles at other companies. I learned a lot. I had a lot of people that I really respected and admired and learned from. And even in my personal life with regards to some of my friends that have mastered their craft, so to speak, I have a lot of respect for people who take an area of discipline or a passion or a hobby or a profession and really hone their skills and master their craft. And so I find examples of that throughout my life. I find examples of that in musicians that I perform with. I find examples of that in meetings with managers who show up and present themselves and conduct themselves a certain way. I've had the opportunity to meet and interact with many Microsoft executives, including Bill Gates and Steve Ballmer, and some of those folks that were famous for their profession and their career and their professional accomplishments. And what I learn is that there's always something to learn from different people that I can take away and apply to my own life and my own situations. And so I don't know that I'd have one that I'd single out. There are certainly some career courses that I've took on critical thinking and precision questioning. A gentleman by the name of Dennis Matthews stands out. He was well known throughout Microsoft as, delivering content around how to examine and assess situations and ask the right questions to get the best outcomes. And that was very formative in my thought process. There was Howard Hayden, who was actually a presenter at RSPA a number of years back that focused on customer excellence. And we hired him when I was at Dynaware to come in and conduct a 2 or 3 day seminar on how to make the customer the center of everything you do. So I just I look for that mastery, that passion, that depth of focus that is respectable and contagious in a way. That's what I look for. I have numerous examples of it. I don't have any one that stands out as this is the one I'm going to share. So it wasn't a very precise answer, but I'm always on the lookout for it and I'm thirsty for it. And you recognize it when you see it. There.
No, I appreciate that. And that's, I can't remember where I read it, but it said successful leaders vacuum the brains of everyone they encounter. everyone they encounter, right? No matter who the person is, there's something they can learn from them. So, gentlemen, thank you for letting me vacuum your brains today and let everybody else listen to it. So, well, that does it for this episode of The Trusted Advisor. If you enjoyed our discussion, be sure to subscribe to the RSPA YouTube channel and the Trusted Advisor podcast so you never miss an episode. And if you'd like to learn more best practices for VARs and ISVs in the retail technology industry, check out the RSPA blog. You can find it at gorspa.org and then clicking on RSPA blog. Before we go, big thanks again to Brett Bennett and Jeff Riley for sharing their wisdom with us today. Thanks also to RSPA Marketing Director Chris Arnold for his production work, Joseph McDade for our music, and last but not least, thanks so much to you for listening. Our goal at the RSPA is to accelerate the success of our members in the retail technology ecosystem by providing knowledge and connections. For more information, visit our website at gorspa.org. Thanks for listening and goodbye, everybody.